Hi, everyone. Ali Hassan here. I am the host of The Forest of Reading this year. And well, the good news just keeps coming for all these wonderful authors. I'm sitting here now with the winner of the White Pine Award for her novel, Hunted by the Sky. Here is Tanaz Bhathena. Hi, Tanaz.
Hi, Ali. How are you?
I'm doing so well. Before we go into anything, let me make sure that I've said your name correctly. When I was growing up, we just took whatever we could get. I was Al, I was Ollie, Ali. I was 100 different. I was Alvinder, Alejandro. I was a lot of things, and I just accepted them all. The way someone's name is pronounced is more important than ever. Let me make sure that I pronounced your name correctly, and you can tell people how you like your name to be pronounced.
I pronounce my name as Tanaz Bhathena. Usually, the last name is tricky because it comes from an old Parsi village in Gujarat called Bhatha. So it's like from Bhatha, so Bhathena. But yeah, that's how I pronounce my name.
All right. Well, the pronunciation is there, and now the congratulations are in order for you. You've won this award. Have you ever won a Forest of Reading award before?
No, this is the first time I'm winning any Forest of Reading award. I was nominated twice before. This time, I didn't even expect to be nominated. When I got the email, I said, "Oh, okay, this is a bit of a shock." And I said, "Okay, I'm not going to win." And now this happens. So I'm still a little bit, stunned that this actually did take place.
Yeah, well, that's great news. And tell me something about winning during a pandemic, and sort of. I guess we're like 15 months on into this pandemic. Does it mean more? Does it change what it means to win an award during this time?
I think it's just amazing to me that kids are still, actively engaged and reading and still, it gives me hope for the future because it means that there's a bit of resilience there, and we have a resilience in sort of our stories. The power of books just keeps moving forward. So I think that is important to me, that there is some sort of real amazing strength that all of us have been having, especially the kids who are reading and voting and showing the same
Mhm.
level of excitement that they would on a normal forest reading festival.
Sure. You have children as well, right? Huh?
No, I don't.
You don't.
I,
I had read you live with your family in Mississauga, but I thought you had children. So I was going to ask you if they read. Um, but if you ever have children, I'm sure they'll be voracious readers. My father was an English teacher, and I never read enough for his liking. He was like, "You're a bum. Why are you outside playing? You should be inside reading." So anyway, you're encouraging something wonderful for kids everywhere. I did want to ask you if there is an opportunity to celebrate in any way this win. Do you make a big dinner? Are there some great Parsi meals that are going to be made for you in celebration?
well, probably dhansak, which is
Dansak.
that is it's basically a rich Parsi lentil stew. It has lentils, pumpkin, usually we add goat or some sort of meat to it
Sure.
because no Parsi meal is complete without meat and, a bit of alcohol on the side. But most of the time nowadays we don't drink. So we'll probably have dhansak. And yeah, and I'm also going to be celebrating next month with the sequel to this book, which is coming out on June the 22nd, Rising Like a Storm. So I'm going to have a book launch at the Book Wardrobe on June 29th. It's a lovely little independent bookstore in Mississauga. So do check us out.
That's
Do
great.
join in.
That's great. Okay, something to look forward to. The sequel is coming out. Some people will say so soon. They just got used to the first book, and now already the sequel. But that's how these things work. Sometimes they just back to back. What a great time to have the sequel coming out right after your win too. That's so perfect.
And the
I
funny thing is, and sorry to interrupt you, but the funny thing is that there's a cliffhanger at the end of this book. So for most people, the sequel can't come soon enough because they have no idea what's going to happen.
Right, right. Oh well, that's good. You end this rather than waiting a year or more. It's right around the corner, and so the book is going to be released in June, right before this book event. Is that right?
Yes, it's going to release on June the 22nd, and the event will be on June 29th.
Okay,
And in
that's
the
great.
meantime, you can still pre-order both Hunted by the Sky, the paperback edition, and
Yeah.
also Rising Like a Storm, also paperback.
I wasn't sure if it was the sequel, but I saw that the artwork is so similar on both the books. So I assumed there had to be a tie-in between the two. Exactly. I said, that's got to be the same girl. That's got to be the same young woman.
Yes, it is the
Can you
same one.
can
Yeah.
you talk about that art, the choice for that art, and who did that?
Yes, absolutely. So both of these books, okay, I'm going to hold up this one as well, is designed by Elizabeth Clark at Macmillan. And basically, the idea was that I wanted this really fierce brown girl at the forefront and in the center. And my publisher was really great because they involved me in the design this time, because usually authors are not really involved in their covers, but I got to give a lot of input, and I asked them, is it possible that we can actually hire a model this time around? So they actually hired a model, a lovely young woman named Tara Gupta. So she models now for Vogue as well, so cheers for her, she's doing really great. And basically the idea was to have this girl at the forefront, and also to sort of um, just show brown girl power and brown girl ferocity, because so
Hmm.
many young kids, especially kids of color, don't see themselves represented in literature, and especially on the covers of books, looking beautiful and fierce. And that's really something that I wanted to put across in this particular series. And there are little details which harken back to medieval India, especially Mughal India. So if you look at the first book and you see that she's standing under a cusped arch, which is very, very common to the Mughal period.
Hmm.
And also the little designs are golden lotuses. And there is a rebel group called the Sisterhood of the Golden Lotus in this book. So it kind of like harkens back to that as well.
Hmm. Well, I saw the level of detail in the cover, and I said I have to address it for sure. Um, I have a book coming out in 2020, and it's called "Is There Bacon in Heaven?" And it's just me,
Awesome.
not a model, not a young, strong, brown person, just me looking up at heaven. And I was like,
You are a strong brown person, and you are young. You're not that old.
I'm. It just looks like a bald goof looking at the sky. But anyway, I appreciate that very much. But I did, because I have been sort of involved in looking at covers and suggestions for covers. I saw this cover and it was immediately appealing, and said I have to ask about that. So that is great. I actually, I wanted to ask you about your youth a little bit, Tanaz, because my best friend growing up was a Parsi guy. Zach Moose was my best friend for most of my life. Still a great friend of mine, which is why I'm familiar with dansak. And the smell, I knew right away when I'd come into their house. I was like, dansak has been cooking in this house over the last few days. That's for sure. Um, but being a Zoroastrian and being a Parsi, Zach would have to repeat himself so many times to be. It didn't mean anything in the 80s, the 70s, and definitely in the 80s, even in the 90s. And was that something you went through, or were you close to the Parsi community, and were there enough people when you were growing up, both in India, and then I think you were in Saudi Arabia, and then you were in Canada? Did you meet enough people who knew what Parsis were growing up, or were you constantly sort of explaining who you are, your background, your community?
I had to explain myself a lot. So I was
Mm.
born in India, and when I was very young, my parents moved us to Saudi Arabia, where I went to an Indian school. But I quickly figured out that most Indians have no clue what Parsis mean unless they're actually from the south of Bombay. So
Right.
for the most part, I had to regularly explain, what's that? You're a Parsi or you're a Zoroastrian. What's that? And I, as an 8-year-old, you don't really know what to say, right? So I kept saying I was a Christian so that people would not ask me. So that was my standby. I was like, oh, I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, I'm something that you're familiar with. Don't ask me this
Sure.
question anymore. I have
Sure.
no idea. So that was something that I did all the time. And later on, I've been able to explain it more clearly now. So basically, Parsis are Zoroastrians. So we come from a small religious community in Persia. So our ancestors came to India as refugees many, many years ago and planted roots in Gujarat and Maharashtra. And the Parsi community has been huge in terms of doing charity work, in terms of really doing a lot of, they're in every business that's involved. If you know Freddie Mercury, you know a Parsi,
This
because
was what
that
Zach always used to say, the lead singer of Queen, the lead
Queen
singer of Queen.
is
That's all he
Parsi.
had. So the movie, when it came out, he was like, finally, they made a movie.
Finally, and yeah, that was great, right? And I love the portrayal as well. And yeah, so Freddie Mercury is one. And chances are, if you lived in India, you've probably seen those big trucks with the word Tata at the back. And
Tata
Ratan
Motors.
Tata is Parsi, and he's a billionaire. He's really, really huge. He has so many hotels. He has charitable organizations. He has a pie in every business, I think,
Right.
over there.
Yeah, yeah,
He's
yeah, yeah.
like he huge over there. So those are two examples that I keep giving out for the most part. But there are many more Parsis who are now coming into the forefront, and even as writers. I mean, Canadian readers may be familiar with Rohinton Mystery. He's
Yeah,
Parsi,
of course. Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah,
yeah, you know him as well. So yeah, there are plenty of us around. We're sneaking around. We're slipping in
yeah.
through the cracks.
Yeah, well, I think it used to be sneaking, and now it's you're sort of proudly out there. And it's, the Zoroastrian faith and the Parsi stories are very, very interesting. And I encourage readers, if Tanaz's descriptions haven't done it enough, I encourage you to look up Parsis and the religion of Zoroastrianism as well. So I wanted to go start there and then talk about your youth as a reader. Were you always a voracious reader as a kid?
I was always reading books, like
Hmm.
anything. And I remember then when I was a kid, I would actually, my mom would read a picture book to me at lunch all the time. And one time I really loved the book, so I made her read it like 3 times, poor thing. And she got tired. So she said, you know what, now you read it. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I started reading, and it's like something just lit up inside me. And it's like, okay, and now I don't need anyone else to read to me. I'll read myself. And I became a very voracious reader who eventually organically transitioned into writing almost. It was like I just wanted to write my own stories, though that time, when I was younger, I would never complete those stories. And
Hmm.
then by the time I was 13, I was writing these short stories, and I was like, okay, I'm going to be a writer. And then my dad said, no, you're going to be an accountant. And that was decided for the rest of the time. And so it was not until my fourth year at university that I said, maybe I want to give this writing thing a real shot. So once I graduated with a BCom, I started working full time in an export company. And I also applied to a correspondence course at Humber College for creative writing. It took me 10 years to get my first book published. And that was a contemporary novel that was set in Saudi Arabia. So it was about a Parsi girl in Saudi Arabia.
Hmm.
And
Living in a
then my
compound?
no,
No,
actually, not
okay.
not
Okay.
living in a compound, because the compounds were actually for Americans and
Exactly. And
Canadians,
Canadians, yes, but
not for
not the
Indians.
Indians and Pakistanis.
Not
Okay.
not for Pakistanis, not for Indians, not for Bangladeshis. We were all outside with the Arabs.
Right, 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 right. Of
So we were all
course.
the middle class. You all, if you lived in a compound, you were probably
Yeah.
rich.
Yeah. Well, no, these were all my friends who happened to be Indians or Pakistanis, but coming from Canada as Canadian citizens
Right.
who lived in compounds, right? So I just know that compound world. But my dad actually lived in Saudi Arabia for 2 years. He lived in Medina. And sure enough,
Awesome.
as you say, he was not on a compound. He was a professor and he just lived among everybody else, among the Arabs. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So definitely we lived there. It was a good childhood. Like I had a happy childhood over there. Um, uh, Obviously, there were very few freedoms, and that was a bit challenging as a woman. It's always a little challenging, but now I've heard it's opening up a lot more. So that's a good
Hmm.
and positive thing to hear. My second book was about an Indian kid, first generation growing up in Canada. It's set in Mississauga. It's called The Beauty of the Moment. And now for
Yeah.
the third one, I just wanted to write something different. I thought, let me try writing a fantasy set in a world inspired by medieval India, because that was like a historical period that I was obsessed with as a teenager. I remember being in history class and being completely bored out of my mind. But when they'd start talking about the Mughals and the Rajputs and all the court intrigue and the politics and the drama and all these many warring kingdoms that rose and fell over a short period of time, these giant labyrinthine palaces that you could all get lost in. I
Mm.
mean, you just have to Google Rajasthan and palaces to really understand what I'm talking about. But
Yeah,
that
yeah.
state is amazing. Also, look at Delhi and all those forts and palaces over there as well. It's just spectacular. So I was completely lost in that world, and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
said
yeah,
I
yeah.
needed to bring that in.
That is such a that is a subject matter that is so rich in history and story and beauty. And you start with a Google search, and you can be lost for days and days in sub search, sub search, sub search. And I've done exactly that, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I want to wrap up with you soon, but I love this story about how it was decided for you. You even went into your BCom, you finished your BCom, because this is a very South Asian story when the parents say, first you become a doctor and then you can do this hobby of yours. And you actually did it. Most kids will be like, no, I can't do that. Can't do what my parents want me to do. I'm very fixated on this one thing. But you have that BCom in hand, and you still went and did the writing, which is great. I think I would be remiss not to ask you about advice you might have for young writers. If there's people who are like yourself, in high school or even younger, who are starting to write and maybe have their eye on a career or a journey somehow into writing literature, what would you say to them?
I would say that if you start something, finish it, because it's never going to be perfect the first time. Most of us have to revise our books all the time. It never is perfect. The first draft of anything is crap. So you're going to have to go back and revise anyway. Just finish it first, no matter how bad it is. And second of all, this business is tough. You're going to get more rejections than acceptances. So just remember one thing: publishing is great, but the greatest joy that you're going to get is by putting words on a blank page. And that's when the whole world will open to you, and that's where your happy space will be. So if writing makes you happy, then don't give up on it at all.
That's such great advice. That's such great, and completed is great. Often, if it's also a good habit to finish things, I find. Otherwise, you get in the habit of starting and not completing, and it's that'll make you becoming an author such a more difficult path. Just the completion in itself is such a huge part of being a writer. I'm going to ask you 10 questions, 10 quick questions. These are supposed to be rapid fire. We'll see how rapid these go, how rapidly they go. How many books do you read a year is question number one.
About 10 to 15.
10 to 15. Tea or coffee?
Tea.
That's the Indian answer, of course. I knew what you were going to say. Favorite movie?
I don't know why DDLJ is coming to my mind, but it's wrong. It's not my favorite movie. I'm going to keep it that way.
DDLJ is a Bollywood film. People, if you don't know it, to spell it would take too long and will take away from our rapid fire. So DDLJ, Shah Rukh Khan film, you should look up that and it'll come up. Favorite thing in your house?
In my house, my writing table.
If you could live anywhere, where would you live?
In Canada.
In Canada, no matter what. If you were trapped on a desert island, what is one food item that you would have to have with you?
I'd have to say chicken shawarma.
Chicken shawarma. What is your dream vacation?
Greece.
What is your favorite dessert?
Gulab jamun.
Okay. What language do you wish you could speak?
Mandarin.
Mandarin. And finally, ebook, physical book, or audiobook?
Physical.
Physical book. Nothing like the feeling of the paper.
Nothing like the feel of the book in your hand.
Yeah. Tanaz, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I will not keep you from your dansak. Dansak, by the way, if anyone has never had it, it takes a long time to make. It is a process. So, if you're helping in that process, you probably should get started right away. We won't be celebrating for a while. Thank you for that information. In June, people who want to see the sequel and who are desperate to find out where the book goes next will definitely be at that event. And we'll have information posted about where that event will be and how they can get their hands on your sequel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ali.